Surprise and welcome. It is April and mid-April, and here we are with inches of snow on the ground. In fact, we skied this morning and it was glorious, and we're still sowing seeds. It's true. I'm going to hang out in the greenhouse for the rest of our Q&A, friends, but I just wanted to begin out here in the glorious winter wonderland in the spring of our Finger Lakes April. And we always begin our Q&As with a song, a poem, some lovely words, and this morning is a sweet song that my friend Dandy taught me. And it's a song about darkness / cold / when you don't know what else to do and what happens next. So here's the song. Though my soul may set in darkness, I will rise in perfect light. I have loved the stars too fondly to be fearful of the night, fearful of the night. I'm going to sing that one more time through. Maybe you can catch a few more words, and then we'll head to the greenhouse where it's nice and cozy. Though my soul may set in darkness, I will rise in perfect light. I have loved the stars too fondly to be fearful of the night, fearful of the night. Or the cold, so we sow seeds. So we are walking from the pond to the greenhouse where we'll be nice and cozy. And this is live Q&A, so jump on in. Any questions you have, don't be shy. And certainly we're going to be tucked cozy in the greenhouse, but there's plenty of seeds way out in the fields. Can you see the fields? Those are the fields. There's so many seeds in those fields already planted under snow, and they are just fine because let me tell you, air temperatures fluctuate so much faster than soil temperatures. And what that means, among other things, is that, hello, welcome to the stand. You will now not feel vertigo. So what that means, that air temperatures fluctuate so much faster than soil temperatures, is that, among other things, when it's mid-April and it's snowing and you're like, oh, Gordon McCall, hi Petra, hello. And good morning, says Diane, good morning. And Jessica's watching, hello. What that means is that those peas that you've already sown, and can you hear the hard snow that's almost hail on the greenhouse? That means that they are just fine. The soil, even though there's snow on top of it, that snow is actually much colder than the soil itself. And so don't worry about those peas you've planted, those sweet peas, that cilantro, that spinach. They are totally fine, cozy. They might not germinate as quickly. They certainly aren't going to grow as quickly, but they're totally fine. And what I've learned over years and years of watching and paying attention is that basically once the crocuses are blooming, the soil is warm enough for those earliest spring seeds, the peas, the cilantro, the arugula, the spinach. The soil is warm enough for those seeds to germinate. And granted, they don't germinate as quickly as they could. The vast majority of seeds, their optimum germination temperature is 75 degrees. So are they going to germinate in a day? In 2 days? No, it might take 2 weeks, but they're not going to rot. Where a bean, for example, would totally rot if you planted it now in this cold, wet soil. But a bean, a pea, a pea, a spinach, a radish is just fine. Which actually brings me to, I wanted to mention, let's talk radishes, because now is the perfect time to sow radishes, and it's not the perfect time to sow watermelon radishes. And Diane says, I'm planting peas and my new fruition radishes today. Yes, amazing. Clearly, you don't have 3 inches of snow on the ground like we do, and that's awesome. But here's the thing, the radishes that you can plant now are early spring radishes, so salad radishes, 3-4 weeks to radishes. So cherry bell radishes like our Sora, or icicle radish like this beautiful French breakfast, perfect choices. If you look at the days to maturity, and they're right up front, 26 days to maturity, that's almost instant gratification in garden world. 26 days to maturity, you've got plenty of time for them to mature before the heat of summer comes. Watermelon radish, on the other hand, 50 days to maturity, double the maturity of the smaller radishes. And it's true, this watermelon radish gets to be the size of a baseball, a softball, so it takes much longer to mature. So it's maturing into the heat of summer if you plant it now, which will just make radishes spicy. So this just in, some radishes, the spiciness in radishes is really more cultural, it's environmental, it's not genetic. So if you don't want spicy radishes in your life, just don't stress them out. And what stresses radishes are heat and lack of moisture. And that's why spring and fall are perfect radish growing weather, because, you know, it's moist and it's cool, so they aren't stressed. And Diane says, I have French breakfast ones. Yes, I'm so glad you have the French breakfast. They are my favorite, it's true. And Renee says, snow-covered morning, beautiful. I got my seed order yesterday, fruit from fruition, hooray. So excited. Should I soak my peat pots before I put the seeds in to start? Not planting in the ground yet, we'll soak when I plant. Awesome question. So yeah, let's talk. I actually have some peat pots right here. So peat pots, also called cow pots, depending on if they're made from peat moss or like washed, very sanitized, don't worry, cow manure. And the cow pots are way more renewable than peat pots, for the record. If you have a choice, if you can find cow pots rather than peat pots, do it. The peat bogs that are being mined and extracted and letting all of that carbon go, like, it's the least renewable resource on the planet, among a few other quality non-renewables. So anytime, and I cringe because peat moss is kind of amazing for seed starting and other purposes in our gardens, but anytime you can get cow pots instead of peat pots, do it. And you don't need to soak your peat pots, my friend. You can simply just put moist, make sure it's moist, but potting mix directly in. And here's a little tip, whether you're planting in peat pots or in 6-packs or just in a regular cell tray of sorts, you want to make sure that you have the optimum amount of soil, i.e. no big air pockets in your peat pot, in whatever container you're growing in. And a little bit is fine, you don't want to press it down and compact it, but you also don't want to have big air pockets. And so fill it up to the top, what looks like the top, and then whatever surface you're working on, just tap it 3-4 times gently. And that will help those air pockets settle out, and then you'll have an entire volume of container full of actual soil, which will mean that there's more nutrients right there for your plants and no big air pockets, so it's healthier for your plants when they're growing in it, and much easier, less disturbing to the roots when you transplant. So certainly when you transplant, we dunk the peat pots in water. And not only in water, this goes for all our transplants actually, not only in water, we put them in water with dilute fish emulsion, because then they have just this instant ton of nutrients right there, right when they need it most, to help them catalyze their growth off into your garden. So there's some little tips for planting into peat pots. And Katrina, hello, asks, are my radishes that I direct sowed in late March going to survive this cold snap? Zone 5, Dansville, New York, hello, just over the hills. Yes, they're going to be just fine, Katrina. And here's the thing, soil temperatures they change, but they've changed very slowly over time. Air temperatures fluctuate like crazy, especially this time of year, right? It was 60 degrees a handful of days ago, and now there's 3 inches of snow on the ground. So air temperatures go like this, soil temperatures go like this. And so basically, if your crocus have bloomed already, your peas and your radishes, your spinach, your cilantro, they're just fine. If they haven't sprouted yet, amazing, and just know that they will, most likely. Certainly they are here on our farm. And our peas that are this tall are just like, okay, we know what to do. They've been dealing with this for millions of years. So some plants haven't, like tomatoes. So evolution doesn't happen just like that, but these plants that are really cold tolerant, oh yeah, trust their cold tolerance is not just a low 40s night, but like inches of snow on the ground. And that's why we're regionally adapting all of our seeds here too. Here at Fruition, all the seeds that we grow, we're regionally adapting them for our short seasons. And that includes overwintering them uncovered in the field, like our kale and our arugula and our cilantro. Cilantro, overwintered, uncovered in the field. So this regional adaptation, certainly they have millions of years of history, but then that's what we're doing here on our farm as well. So Jessie, hello, asks, I live in Broome County, awesome, and not sure what zone that is. When is a good time to start herbs like parsley, sage, thyme? Great question. And Broome County, you're probably zone 5 as well, depends on the elevation. But I'm going to say that you can plant when we plant, and that is perfect. So at the risk of being ridiculous, I do have this little planting calendar, and if you don't already have it in your life, check it out. You can, every order we send out has one in them, and also you can find it on our website for free, on our blog, our garden planning blog, and you can download this on our Direxo and transplant charts totally for free. So check this out, and just if you see us doing something, you can say, oh, it's time to do that. So our parsley, we are not going to start for another week, 2 weeks, kind of end of April is perfect, because we don't want to be planting it out till the end of May. It's a 4-week-old transplant. Your sage and thyme, I would start about now though. They take a little bit longer to germinate, and if you have a heat mat, amazing. Heat mats just help all seeds germinate. Most seeds germinate faster because the vast majority of seeds really germinate quickest at like 75, 80 degrees, which is way warmer than we keep our homes. And so having this little mat that helps raise the temperature of the soil on it 15, 18 degrees above ambient air temperature is amazing. So if you don't have a heat mat, that's totally fine, but start that sage and thyme now. And don't be surprised if your germination is a little less. If you do have a heat mat, just start it now and you'll be amazed how quickly it jumps out of the ground. Or you can start in a couple weeks, but they'll be really small by the time you transplant. So as a general rule too, Jessie, perennials like sage and thyme take longer to germinate than annuals. And I have a lot of theories around it, but it's a good general rule across vegetables. I was going to say animals and minerals. Like I want listening Gilbert and Sullivan or something. But when it comes to vegetables, flowers, and herbs, that is a true across the board, that annuals generally are much quicker to germinate than the perennials. And so starting them a couple weeks ahead, so that sage and thyme, starting them a couple weeks ahead of your parsley, you'll be pleasantly surprised. But yeah, anytime now, but know that we're going to be starting them in the next 10 days probably. And Jamie asked, I started peppers in cells 8 weeks before last frost. I'm in zone 5P, and when should I plant up? Awesome question. So let's talk. I brought some little things to share. It's little show and tell. So here are some little peppers. I'm so glad you asked, in mini blockers. And so these little mini blocks are made by these brilliant little mini blocks, which we love so much. And we basically put them full of soil where we compress them, but not too much. And then we pop them out, and it's so much fun. And then we have these lovely little soil blocks, and we plant 1 single seed per soil block, 2 if you're not sure about its germination. But with Fruition seeds, if they germinate less than 90%, we don't sleep at night if we're actually sharing them with you. So you can be really confident, and we just put 1 seed per. And take a look. This is absolutely the oldest that I would pot up this pepper, because take a look, this is a little 1/2-inch cube of soil. Granted, it's really high quality, nutrient dense soil, so there's a lot going for this little plant, but it's a finite amount of nutrients that it has in life, and to say the least. So this is the minimum size, or the maximum size that I would pot up from a soil block. Honestly, take a look at this guy. Just barely emerged, right? That's the dream. If you can pot up from mini blocks at that stage, fabulous. So if you've planted them in cell trays, I let them get to that full, yes, come on back. So this So let's talk about plant biology for just a hot, beautiful minute. So these are the cotyledon leaves. And the cotyledons are like the first primordial leaves. They're leaves, they're photosynthesizing, they're green, but they're not true leaves. They're basically the inner germ of the seed emerging, turning into a solar array. And no matter what you do, these cotyledon leaves are about to turn yellow and fall off in like 3 weeks once you have 3 sets of true leaves. So you can see right at the top, can you see? Oh my gosh, there's a tiny little true leaf emerging. So as soon as your true leaves are emerging, that's when I would pot them up. If you have them growing in this cell tray, that's when you have your first set of true leaves. At that point, pot them up. And here's just a general notion to keep in mind, friends. You want your plants to grow at this 90-degree curve of just happiness and health, and Bertie Madoff proved, as did capitalism, that like you can't just grow and grow and grow and grow and grow and like not grow at some point. So fast political thoughts from Petra Page, man. But that being said, it can nonetheless be an appropriate goal for you to grow your transplants and do everything you can so they have this even keel, 90-degree growth curve of just happiness and health and plenty of food, plenty of light, everything they need to not be stressed. Unstressed transplants and plants in general offer so much abundance, so much more abundance for us to harvest than stressed transplants. Just like me, when I'm stressed, I'm not nearly as productive or happy or competent or any of these things. Maybe you're the same. So you want your plants to be as happy as possible too. So planting them up, transplanting, potting them up early and often is the best way to really ensure that they are getting all the nutrients that they need. And of course, light you can't skimp on. Let's talk about light too. But yeah, once they have true leaves in this lovely cell tray, I would pot them right up into a 3-inch pot, a 4-inch pot. And as soon as this plant has 3 sets of true leaves and is burgeoning a 4th set, if you have a larger container, that's when you would pot it up from there. And if you don't have a larger container or or enough space, that's when you write a note in your Across the Seasons Perpetual Calendar that, oh, I started peppers too early. Which is really common, especially when it's so warm as it has been. This March had so many warm, dreamy days, right? And then here we are with 3 inches of snow on the ground in mid-April. So it's really easy to start seeds too soon. And that's why, I actually left my calendar at home that has all of my exciting notes. So this is just a blank one. But for example, so a perpetual calendar has dates, but not days of the week. And so you'll see, awesome, the dates almost never change. There's always going to be how many days in February, but instead of Monday, Tuesday, Sunday, we have years. So you can see, oh, I planted the tomatoes at this date, and the hummingbirds returned at this date, and I transplanted up at this age. They were too old, so now I know plant them early next year. There's also this whole section in the back that I just love because it's helpful to have the play-by-play of the days, but here's this whole section as well. Let's dig in because we do and we are, and thank you for joining me. This is a whole section for just specific crop types. So you can look at your tomatoes, for example, and here's your variety name, your seed source. Oh, and date sown, indoors, outdoors, how you prepared your soil, the plant spacing, all of these details, so that it's helpful to have both, right? To flip through and see what all happened in June, but to have all of your tomato and all of your garlic and all of your lettuce stats right there is so helpful. So that's why we made Across the Seasons Perpetual Calendar. And I don't just put, like, when I potted up my tomatoes, I'm like, the winter wrens returned and there's amphibian eggs in the pond and all kinds of these fun things, which also help me track, when our final frost dates. They're always so nebulous, right? But the multiflora roses and the oxeye daisies, if those both have bloomed in the last 8 years, isn't going to be there's going to be another frost. So these are the kinds of little notes and paying attention that make me come alive. And I hope that they will for you too. And Eva says, so this weekend would be good to direct sow some radishes and beets. Totally, depending where you live. Of course, here in New York or in the Finger Lakes, I began outside our greenhouse by our pond where there's 3 inches of snow on the ground and it's absolutely beautiful. We actually went for a ski this morning. So it would not be great for anyone in our area. But if your soil is warm enough, so if your crocuses have already bloomed and well drained enough, if it's not mud, then you're totally good to go. Especially with the radishes, depending where you are, I might hold off on beets. So something like spinach, peas, arugula, radishes, super cold hardy. Don't mind, can germinate in much cooler soils. Beets are more like, could you make it 50 degrees? They're a little more, they want it to be a little warmer. So I would, if you live anywhere warmer than zone 6, go for it. Radishes and beets, you're good to go. But if you're anywhere kind of north of Pennsylvania, north of Philadelphia rather, I would hold off on your beets for another week or 2 and don't be shy in the radish department. And Jessie says, awesome advice. Thanks so much. Thank you so much. This is such a joy. And thank you to all of my friends and mentors and all of our ancestors who have learned so much across all the millennia. And I cringe to stand here and be like, blah, 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 blah. I know all these things. I'm learning all of these things from people who have learned so much more than me. And I'm learning constantly what I don't know. And I'm like, oh gosh, people look to me to be the professional. But we're all climbing this mountain together, friends. I'm so honored to share everything that I've learned that brings me joy. And I hope that it brings you more joy and just more questions as well. I'm way more compelled by questions than answers. So Jessica asks, I love you, Jessica. Thanks for joining us. I'm potting up some of my peppers later today. Woohoo, happy dance. I haven't gotten my good potting mix delivered yet. Oh my gosh, my screen won't let me see your further question. Oh, there it is. Yes. I only have Miracle Grow. Oh, any tips on amending that to make it better? I don't want to wait anymore to pot up as the seedlings are getting large. I have fish emulsion and your fertilizer mix on hand. Wow, these are humbling questions and first world problems for sure. But honestly, I would say just use the Miracle Grow. The reason that I don't encourage Miracle Grow is because it's using chemically soluble fertilizers, and you're not going to take away those chemically soluble fertilizers when you plant into it. You can amend it with other things for sure, but honestly, that would just be packing it full of so many nutrients, and it's hard to say. It's possible that you could actually negatively affect your plant as a direct result of having too many nutrients in it. So if you've got potting mix on hand and it happens to be Miracle Grow, rejoice and just use that and be grateful. And it's awesome that you potted them up you started them in something that wasn't, and you're setting them out into your organic garden, and that you know that organic fertility that actually makes plants forage in the soil for nutrients instead of just having manna from heaven of chemically soluble NPK delivered unto them. I'm glad that you know this, but don't let it freak you out and prevent you from potting up. If you're, the cost benefit analysis of potting up a plant later than you wanted with organic, or potting it up when you want with in or with conventional, I would probably choose the conventional myself, just because, especially with peppers will pout. How many of you experience that? I know I have. Peppers get stressed and sad. They just pout and sit there, and they might grow a tiny bit, and they might even flower, but not very much, and they certainly won't fruit. So peppers and eggplants too they're really petulant. If they ever get stressed, they just pout. And so tomatoes, you've got lots of other options. If they get a little tall, or you can always just plant their stems. We should talk about that too. But peppers you can't, so you really can't mess around in their happiness department. So, which is a long way to say, rejoice, you have something, and it's way better than nothing. So, yes, I can't believe I'm saying this, but plant with your miracle grow, and it's amazing. Way to be resourceful and use what you have on hand, Jessica. And Bill says, hi, I'm an hour or two drive north of you. Is it too late to start peppers or tomatoes indoors? And, my screen is not... I'm not helping myself. I can't see the rest of your question. Am I too late for anything? So let's talk. You're an hour or two drive north of us. So maybe you're right on Lake Ontario, or are you actually like up in Louville and getting toward the Adirondacks? Either way, it's final call for planting tomatoes and peppers, eggplants here in Zone 5. And if you haven't already, go for it. Don't dally. And praise be, you didn't start them too early, which is the classic pitfall that many people start way too early, and it's totally natural, so don't beat yourself up. But yes, don't dally. If you haven't planted them now, it's officially last call. So I'm so glad you asked, Bill, and don't hesitate. And am I too late for anything? You're too late if you haven't already started ginger. It's really too late in our short season. Also, if you haven't started your onions, it's really final call for that too, but it was kind of final call 10 days ago. So it's not too late. If you have them on hand, go for it. But if you don't, let it go and make a little note in your across the seasons calendar to start your onions a little bit earlier next year. But honestly, you're not too late for most things. And I just want to widen up and say, like, it's so easy to plant things way too early, and especially in the age of social media when we have friends in Florida that are starting seeds and then we see it on our screens here in New York and we're like, oh my God, we're late. And so it's really easy to start seeds too early anyway, because we are the harbingers of spring and we live in a short season. And so if we live in a short season, we need to start them earlier, right? And so there's all of these thoughts that are so valid, compounded by the social pressure of social media. But yes, resist all of this social pressure, and know that a younger, healthier, unstressed transplant every time is going to be more adapted, more productive than an older, unstressed seedling. So when you're planting a tomato this tall in 6 weeks and everyone else is planting tomatoes this tall and they're flowering and they're really stressed, and you can say, yes, thanks, Petra. Or thank you to the untold countless ancestors of tomatoes and humans that have taught us all of these things that we're constantly learning and laughing at ourselves as we learn the hard way. So Renee asks, and thank you for mentoring all of us. So grateful for your inspiration and experience. Thank you, my friends. And thank you for passing it on. I love to share what I love to learn. And so I try not to be too much of an evangelist, but growing gardens is amazing, and they grow so much more than food for us and for each other. So thank you for being part of why we do what we do. And Leah says, thank you for sharing as always. Thank you, Leah. And Christine says, hello, thank you for the tips. Can I move tomatoes off the heating pad once they sprout? They are sharing with peppers that have not sprouted yet. Can't wait for the beet seeds I ordered for you to come. So yes, here's the thing about heat mats. They are magic, and they really hasten germination. And then any growth, they're off to the races as well. But the real key of a heat mat is to catalyze that germination. So once they've germinated, if you have other things that need to germinate, take what has germinated off the heat mat so you can put new, freshly germinating seeds on. We have a bunch of heat mats here in the greenhouse, and they are just this constant carousel of soil blocks going on that haven't sprouted yet. Once they sprout, they come off so that new plants can go on and sprout. But if you don't have any, because it's really valuable real estate, right? It's, certainly we have these long red velvet carpets of heat mats. But most heat mats, and certainly the ones that you can find on our website, they're the perfect size for a single cell tray. So it's really valuable real estate. But if you don't have anything that's pressing that needs to go on that heat mat right away, just keep those tomatoes on. Any plant is going to grow that much faster, that much better, but especially eggplants, peppers, tomatoes, they're tropical plants. And any time that they are experiencing anything like tropical conditions, they're that much healthier, that much happier, as a result, that much more productive, abundant, resilient when it comes to diseases and insects. So yes, if you don't have anything else pressing to get onto that heat mat, Christine, go ahead and leave them on. But if you do have other things that you really want to get germinating, I don't blame you, so do we. As soon as those whatever seeds germinate, take them off. And wonderful question. And Steve says, supposed to start peppers February 15th. It depends, honestly, where you are. So if you're growing in Texas, February 15th is way late. And if you're starting your peppers here in New York, you're way early. So check out, we have a little planting calendar that's for zones 4 through 6. And we also have, if you haven't already checked out, we have our Rise and Shine Starting Seeds with Ease. And that is 40 pages of tons of things that I've learned across the years. And there's a direct sowing chart, there's a transplant chart, and this transplant chart has sow before dates. So like peppers, you start 6 to 8 weeks before your final frost. So that makes it's, rather than going by dates, which are going to change given climate change, it's like no matter how the climate changes, you want to start a pepper 6 to 8 weeks before final frost, especially if you don't have, a really nice seed starting scenario. So yeah, great question, and I'm so glad you asked. And Ralph Mann, my father, good morning, Dad, I love you, I miss you. My dad says, clearing snow off the hoop houses and prepay this morning. Can I open the hoop houses when it's only 40 out? Great question. So yeah, so a little backdrop. My father is amazing and I love him so much and I miss him so much. And I grew up in my father's garden, so I have my father to thank for so much that I know, and certainly all of the joy that I have. I just thank you, Dad. So my dad has this lovely garden a mile down the road from us here at Fruition Seeds at the farm, and they have little hoops that are really, I didn't bring any to share, but we have these spring steel hoops, and you can also just, if you have other larger gauge pipes, they're only about 3 feet tall perhaps at their apex, and then he covered some with plastic, some with floating row cover, basically spun polyester that lets more light in than a sheet. So he's cleaning the snow off them and is asking, can I open the hoop house when it's only 40 degrees out? So yes, if the plastic is any time above like 80 degrees, you really want to be opening it up. But honestly, if it's not that warm, I would leave it closed. Also, but granted, there's kind of this balance too, where you don't want to open it up if it's too cold, but having the incessant humidity and completely stagnant airflow can also be a liability. So probably this week you haven't opened up, especially the plastic, too much. So maybe just open it up a tiny bit and let that humidity flux. But honestly, I wouldn't keep it open for very long if you do. And yeah, I don't know if you have a little temperature gauge that you can put in and hang, but I would, if it's above 85, open it inside. But if it's below 85, all of that heat that you're capturing within, regardless of the temperature outside, is just going to help your plants grow better. So thanks, Dad, and thank you all. And Gordon asks, how soon can I plant potatoes? Wonderful question. That also has a range. So you can start planting potatoes. Basically, now you could plant them. It's a little bit early and you might lose some to rot, but you could totally plant them. Beginning of May is a pretty ideal date where the soil is warm enough and they're gonna take off, but it's still really early for us here in Zone 5. So you're gonna get a nice early harvest, especially if it's an early variety. But you can honestly plant potatoes, anytime through like even to late June. and you're going to harvest potatoes. Granted, it'll be a lot later into the season, but they're going to make potatoes. So you can, if you're here in zone 5, I would plant right at the beginning of end of April, at the earliest beginning of May is pretty ideal. But know that you have quite a window. And Dave asks, do we need to pot up tomatoes 2 times before transplanting out, or can I go directly from 2-inch blocks to 4-inch blocks and then outside? Awesome question. So yeah, it so depends. It depends on the planting containers. So we love these mini blockers, heavens above. They just optimize our heat mats because we can fit 200 of them on a standard size heat mat. And then they grow into these marvelous little guys. So this is as large as we would pot up from a mini blocker. This is the ideal size, just barely emerged. And from there we would plant up into a more standard size cell tray. 6-pack is totally kosher. And at that point, once you have 1 to 2 sets of true leaves, pot them up into your 3-inch, 4-inch pots. So if you're doing the mini blocker, you definitely want to do 3 iterations, 3 potting up successions. But if you're starting in a 2-inch container, probably 2 is just fine. So yeah, these 6-packs, starting them in here and then pot them up into here. You're good to go. So great question, and I'm so glad you asked. So much depends on the container, but really so much, it's just experience too, right, friends? It's so much of just experience of what your plants look like and how they get stressed, and just cutting them off at the pass and just anticipating before they get stressed, potting them up prior so that you can just keep them as happy as possible, as long as possible. And Jason says, good morning from Wyoming County. Good morning, Jason. Thanks for joining us. And Jessica says, yeah, I am grateful to have a potting mix at all. Yes, amen. And Bill says, thank you, I already started my onions. Fabulous. And Jen says, I feel guilty throwing away seedlings I thinned out, so I replant them in their own cells. Is that a bad idea? No, it's not a bad idea at all. If they're young especially, you can totally transplant them. Some, granted, have a more sensitive root system than others. So some of them, like for example, yes, I brought some of these lovely little guys. These lovely burgeoning seedlings of double take cosmos and salmon rosinea. You could totally transplant them into their own cells, but they're a little more sensitive with their root system, so they're a little less impressed, and they're going to be a little less tenacious as a result, lot less resilient. Something like lettuce, kale, even honestly peppers and tomatoes certainly, instead of thinning them by killing them, by thinning them by opening them up and separating them, planting them into individual cells is a fantastic way to amplify your abundance. So yeah, great question. Keep in mind too that with many seedlings, they are delicious, and so I don't hesitate to enjoy your microgreens as you go too. And Courtney asks, I'm planting raised beds on my front lawn because that's where I get sun. Where should I till up the grass first? Great question. So much depends. I wouldn't myself. I would put landscape fabric down and then build your raised bed on top of that, especially depending where your house is. If you're in kind of a development where they took off all of the topsoil to sell back to you, just put, and you've got like really clay, rocky soil right there, just put fabric down. Also, if you maybe have, like our home is an old Victorian house that had several layers of lead paint on it. So it's really wonderful that we have this beautiful 24-acre farm, and hilarious that 2 miles away we have our house where we grow lots of beautiful plants just to look at because we don't want to be ingesting any of those lead or other chemicals. So much depends on the environment that you're growing in, but if you're growing in an environment where you vaguely think you might not want your plants to ever engage with it, or that it might stress them or stress you, just put down landscape fabric and you'll be good to go. And Lily says, my soil is still too wet to work. Can I plant peas or radishes after last frost? What if the soil fails the wetness test in summer? Yeah, so great question. So let me share about the wetness test first. And I can't wait to go out in the fields maybe this week on Tuesday for a live Q&A and do this in person. So here's the little test. You take a shovel and go out to your garden and dig down 6 inches and make a little ball, like the size of a large golf ball, and press it together so it's a ball and not necessarily like compacting it like crazy, but you're making a ball, and then drop it from waist height onto the ground. And not like throwing it on the ground, but just dropping it. And if it goes into 1,000 pieces, your soil is dry enough to work. If it remains in a ball, your soil is too wet to work. And if you work it, whether it's with a tiller or even double digging with just a fork, you're going to be disturbing soil structure, and you're actually setting yourself back not only for this season, but for years to come. It's one of the easiest beginning gardener mistakes, and even just not beginning gardener, but just impatient gardener mistakes. So yes, if your soil is too wet to work, basically sometimes if it's mud, you don't want to plant your peas and radishes into it. But if it's open enough and still light enough, you can actually plant, especially if you prepare your beds in fall for spring and have that foresight, then you can actually plant without doing any tillage or any kind of soil prep. So that's a marvelous thing to keep in mind for future times. But otherwise, like, you really don't want to work your soil at all until your soil passes that wetness test. And even if I know here we are in the mid of April and there's 3 inches of snow on the ground. So we're like, but what if it never dries out ever? But it will. I'm going to go out on a limb and just trust me, it will. And it will be worth the wait. And in the meantime, there are lots of wild plants that you can eat, so check out if you haven't already seen my posts about what we're eating from the fields already. Check it out, because there's a lot that you can be eating even if you can't sow it. And Vincent says, hello, Vincent. Well, I said hello, Vincent. Joined late. Sorry, it has been asked, but I have limited space to grow light, and I have started tomatoes, and I am not seeing the rest of your question. There, I finally got it. So I have limited grow light space. I started some tomatoes April 1st, some more on April 9th. Among the first round of tomatoes, some are slightly yellowed. Don't know if it's soil, under watering, bad light. So I'll just address that first. If they're yellow, that most likely is a nutrient deficiency. If it's a light deficiency, they're going to be pale and like not yellow, but like white. Also, they're going to be growing really tall and probably slantwise. They're not going. If they have plenty of light, they're short and stout and dark green. So yellow with seedlings generally means there's a nutrient deficiency. And having heard your warnings on having fewer, healthier plants versus more and stressed, so I just toss out the yellowed plants and focus on keeping the second round healthier. Can fish emulsion help? I already added some. Yes. Honestly, Vincent, I love you so much, and I love your seeds and tomatoes so much, and this is what a learning curve looks like, right? I love when people say, I'm going to digress briefly, when people say, Petra, I don't know if I can garden. I kill lots of plants, and I say, you have no idea how many plants I kill every year intentionally. And unintentionally. It's just part of what we do to learn. So the more important thing is to, yes, be honest, which you are, and to have friends who are also honest with you, which I am. And so, yes, send me pictures. And especially, I think you're a member of Flourish Garden Club. Post them on our private forum, and we'll talk about it. And in general, you can also post things on Fruition Seeds Facebook page, and we'll try to get back to you as quickly as possible. But yeah, send me pictures, and I'll give it the official yay, nay. But probably if they're yellow already, I would send them to your chickens and just focus on that second round and keeping them as healthy as possible. And fish emulsion is great. I'm concerned though that I'm curious what potting mix you're potting up into, because fish emulsion is amazing, but it's kind of a supplement, and you can't really make up for the fact that you aren't using really nice potting mix to begin with. So yeah, let's dial in and write back, and you probably already have, and it's just down in the comments. I'll try to go find it. But yeah, let's dial in the potting mix that you're using. And yes, fish emulsion is amazing, but we're using it as a supplement. And honestly, we don't put fish emulsion on any of our transplants until we have tomatoes, peppers, eggplants with 3 sets of true leaves. And that is the optimum. And Ashley asks, what soil do you use to start seedlings? Great question. You don't use garden soil, you use potting mix. Potting mix is much lighter, and it also has a lot of specific nutrients really available for just tiny burgeoning seedlings. So honestly, there's lots of different options, but check out, we have this DIY potting mix, minerals that you can add to really easy, accessible, economical ingredients. There's a whole recipe on back, and this makes 80 quarts of really nice potting mix that is perfect for seed starting, for potting up, for house plants. It's kind of awesome. And it's just minerals. I wish you could feel how heavy it is. And these are the minerals that most potting mixes don't have in them, because they're the actual expensive part of the potting mix. So yeah, there's honestly not a lot of potting mix that I recommend. If you can find Fort V from Compost Based from Vermont Compost Company, we actually have it and share it. We've sold out of what we had for this year, and that's what we use. But second best and not second fiddle is this DIY potting mix. So yeah, I'm so glad you asked, and it makes all the difference. If you can spend a little more money on potting mix, it just translates into so much more abundance down the line. It's definitely not the place to pinch your pennies. And Jason asks, I have a pack of organic New York slicing 264 cucumbers, and are they a bush or long vine? Yeah, they are a long vine, my friend. I also have Space Master 80, which are my favorite cucumber in the South Garden. Yes! So I actually brought a little cucumber to share something. So cucumber! And basically, you'll see in the 264, it's a full vine. On our seed packets, it'll say full 5-foot vine or 2-foot bush. So you'll see on the 264, it's a bush. It's a vine. The Space Master 80, one of my favorite names of any plant variety, is a very contained 2 feet bush of a slicer. It's a fabulous Cornell variety, as is the 264. And the 264 is downy mildew resistant, where the Space Master is actually powdery mildew resistant as well. So Greta, Steel and Love says, hi Petra! Hello Greta, so glad you're joining us this morning. Oh my gosh, shivers down my spine. And Kimberly says, hi from northern Saratoga County. See you for a dance flurry next year, I hope. And Jen asks, based on what I have on hand, I started some of our seeds in styrofoam cups and don't anticipate I will have to pot them up. Is there a reason to start small and pot up? Is it just a matter of fitting fewer seedlings under the grow lights or on heat mats? Yes, wonderful question, astute observation. The benefit of starting them in these tiny little soil blocks is I can fit 200 of them on a heat mat that fits a cell tray, and I can pot them up from there. Also, it's less thinning, and you can just kind of monitor their health as you go and adapt just as you go. But by all means, if you're only growing a few plants and you want to just start, and you can have them in a really warm place, because the benefit of them being, whether it's in a mini block a half inch above the soil block or in a cell tray 2 inches above, in the styrofoam container you might be 5 inches plus above the heat mat, or just, the warmer the seeds are to start to germinate, the quicker they'll germinate, and the warmer they are in general, the faster they'll grow. So yeah, but honestly, if you are only starting a handful of plants and want to keep life super simple, that's a great way to do peppers and eggplants especially. Tomatoes, I still recommend potting up, because this is a pepper, so I wouldn't recommend this. But anything that, if let's pretend for a moment that this in fact is a tomato. Crazy facts: tomato stems can be buried and they turn into roots. Tomato stems can be buried and they turn into roots. This pepper would just die. The vast majority of plants in our gardens would just die. This is an incredible adaptation from this tropical plant across the millennia. So that as such an advantage for us as seed starters, because honestly, when I pot this up, if this was a tomato, which is a pepper, so I wouldn't, but if I was potting this up into this little 6-pack, the pepper I would grow like this and have the soil, the top of the soil and the bottom of the plant maintained. If this was a tomato, I would bury this entire stem up to the tip tops of those leaves. And then as it pots up again, then you just get to bury the stem deeper and deeper, making a more extensive root system, which just makes ultimately a healthier plant. So there's a few thoughts on why potting up is nice, but certainly, especially with peppers and eggplants, it's really nice. Tomatoes, I still would recommend potting them up so you can actually get the benefit of all of those extra roots. And Ashley says, thanks, Petra, you're so welcome. And Melanie says, thanks from northern central Ohio. Awesome. Thanks for sharing your knowledge. You're welcome. And Vincent says, follow up on potting soil. It's from fruition, but it's at least 2 years old and it's sat outside in the rain and snow. Yes, the soil, the nutrients have been leached. I've also added a bit of bagged potting soil, and when potting up, I've been adding some of our recent delivery of compost from Vermigreen. I poured off the water of the potting mix and started using it, so maybe I should be watering with this compost tea. Yeah. I think that is just a classic experience of using a potting mix that isn't dialed in fresh for that season. It seems like a really easy, basic thing, but it's just kind of not. But I think that you've got a great base there with the Vermigreen compost and using that compost tea. I still kind of want to get you some of this, the DIY seed starting potting mix, so that you can add that, and I think you'll be that much more abundant and successful. And Melissa says, hello, I started up seed blocks, but I'm struggling knowing when to water. My tomatoes seem stressed and I'm concerned I'm overwatering and then underwatering. Any tricks? Yeah, so I keep in mind with soil blocks, and I've got some fine ones here in a lovely takeout container, which thank you, Melissa, and so many other people. I am so blown away that takeout containers are fabulous for starting seeds. So the nice thing about soil blocks is they dry out not nearly as fast as whether it's peat pots or these 6-packs or basically anything else, because it's so compressed. The soil is so compressed. So you'll be amazed. You can actually let it get quite dry on the outside, and there's still plenty of moisture in the bottom. And I like to bottom water, where imagine you have the bottom of your takeout container here, and you're putting water just a tiny bit, just a few millimeters on the bottom, and then there's a tiny bit of airspace between that bottom tray and this upper tray. This upper tray I poked holes in, so on an inch grid, so the water condenses on the top and then it will wick up from below. So that is the dream, no matter how you're starting seeds, if they're in cell trays or in soil blocks. And that way you're keeping water at the base, at the roots where water is needed most. So yeah, I recommend that. And send us photos of your tomatoes too, because if they're seeming stressed, it could very easily be a nutrient deficiency too, especially if you're overwatering and then underwatering. Soil blocks, the nice thing about it is they kind of moderate that pretty profoundly compared to, other things like cell trays. So yeah, send us some. And if you haven't already joined our Seed Starting Academy, there's some great videos about watering in there too. And Nancy says, have we discussed methods to deter birds or squirrels? I have started a couple rows of direct sow kale, radish, and beets. Do I need to be on the defense? So it really depends. I find in Rural areas, not so much. In urban areas, yes. Urban areas, there just tends to be less food per capita and so I just see a lot of my friends with their urban gardens having a lot more pressure from animals. And generally, yeah, your kale is going to be tasty. Your beet tops, less tasty, but still your radishes, they'll most likely leave alone. But honestly, if you haven't already gotten some floating row cover, that's always a handy thing that will deter them. Just make sure that you are actually putting something down over the edges so they can easily crawl up under it. But if you have something long, narrow, and weighty on the edges, then you have these solid, you've like tucked them in and they're much more protected. And yeah, just a few more questions, and I'm already sad that it's getting to be time to disappear. And Jessica says, yes, this is good to know. The squirrels literally ripped through my floating row cover to dig up my garden bed. Thankfully, they chose the small area where I didn't plant my radishes, peas, and turnips and cilantro or kale. And yes, if you don't already have a dog, dogs are wonderful, and a great deterrent as well. And otherwise, yeah, if anyone has any other ideas, certainly jump out, because this is a persistent, consistent, and perennial problem for so many of us. And Anna says, hello, hi friend, this is my first year gardening on my own. Do it yourself, learn along the way. Yes, this is the rest of our lives. And I don't have seed cells or blocks for my New York early onions. I just used Tupperware with 1-inch potting mix and broadcasted the seeds, covered them up. I have hope, but I'm also new at this, so any hints or tips, thanks for sharing. I love you, and you kind of knocked it out of the park, my friend. So with onions especially, you can just broadcast them in an open flat, and they will be really, really happy. So you knocked it out of the park there. That's basically the only plant that we in fact do that. We have entire flats that are just full of onions. All their roots are going like this, but they effortlessly pull apart, where something like these lettuces would become very interlocked and tangled, and they would be really stressed if I was pulling them apart like that. So you knocked it out of the park with your onions, but if you're growing other things too, and you don't have cell trays, peat pots, soil blockers, we're just experimenting with these toilet paper rolls, which I kind of love, kind of don't love also. That truly is second fiddle. Like, it's just not as good as having bona fide, like cell trays or something. It is way better than egg cartons. So, because there's just more soil and they're easier. What we're learning too, we don't want to pot up in this. So, we don't want to actually plant this in the ground. We'll take this transplant out of the toilet paper roll to plant it in, because, there's just, if the toilet paper roll is really dense, it's not going to decompose fast enough to not constrain the root system. And I just have to imagine there are dioxins and bleaches and all kinds of other chemicals in this cardboard, because it's an industrial process, and that's, those things are in cardboard egg cartons, so I have to imagine that they're here too. So yes, this is a great way. Toilet paper rolls cut into these 1-inch pieces are a great way to start seeds if you have absolutely nothing else to start seeds in. A tip with them: you don't want to keep them incessantly moist. And if you can, just water the top of the plant itself, awesome. Because you can see with this one, the adhesive is totally coming off. It very quickly digresses, as do I. But it also is prone to molding. All of the ones we've been experimenting with, after like 5 days, even without incessantly watering them, they had this white mold bloom on them, and we promptly took them out of our greenhouse. So can you do it? Yes. Are there liabilities? Yes. So I'm so glad you asked, and I am so grateful to share these little tips with you. And keep in touch. You're not alone, and don't be shy. And Melissa asks, I did pot them up with the Coast of Maine potting mix. Awesome. They are also top notch, and added half the strength balanced organic fertilizer. Fantastic. That sounds like a wonderful way to do it, friends. So one more tip from George. 5-gallon bucket of water, rodents jump in and drown. Yeah, actually, oh gosh, I forget what it was. I've seen some really brilliant slash like devastatingly brilliant techniques. Oh gosh, I can't remember off the top of my head, but there's like peanut butter involved, and yeah, hilarious and brilliant. And thank you, George. And thank you all for joining me. It is a beautiful day here in the Finger Lakes. We skied this morning on 3 inches of snow up at Ontario County Park, and now we're cozy in our greenhouse. And I hope that wherever you are in the world and wherever you are in your mind and heart, that it's so amazing that we're here together in this time. So I close all of our live Q&As with a poem, with a quote, with a song. And so I would love to close today and this session with a little song that I learned from my dear friend, Dandy Rich. And if you're not done with Q&A, I'm about to jump over into Instagram. So by all means, if you have more questions and want to hang out more, hang out with me on Instagram. And also, if you want to see this after the fact, I put the recording into our Seed Starting Academy archives. And if you haven't already heard, our Seed Starting Academy, it has over 6 hours of video tutorials. It's a $100 course that we made free 5 weeks ago because we're all in this together. We all need this more than ever. And we all grow more when we all know more. So it is my huge honor to share what I love with people that I love. So if you haven't already joined, jump on our website, fruitionseeds.com. You'll find it under our online courses, and you'll find this recording tucked into our archives there, among so many other resources for you, friends. So without further ado, we are ending this live Q&A from us with a song, and thank you to Dandy Rich and the countless lineages of women who have shared these songs across the eons. Though my soul may set in darkness, I will rise in perfect light. I have loved the stars too fondly to be fearful of the night, fearful of the night. Though my soul may set in darkness, I will rise in perfect light. I have loved the stars too fondly to be fearful of the night, fearful of the night. Fearful of the night, or cold, or isolation. You pick. There are so many things to pick from. I'm so glad we get to be together in this time, friends. Thank you.